First of all, let me say thank you to DEval for this invite to come here to Bonn. It's a great opportunity for us to learn what's going on here, and I would like to say that we are not coming here as experts or talking about just our methods, but actually it's more about having a conversation and see how many different type of heuristics there are in this room to look at this problem, so we can all kind of increase hopefully at the end of today our understanding of climate adaptation, which, as we all know, is not the most easy subject to evaluate. So the experiences that we bring today are really coming from the journey that we have done with our partners. Many of these tools and approaches have come out from the projects that we have been running with partners, and from the different conversations that we had in different parts of the world. And at the end of today, we will give this 30-45 minutes presentation, but then we hope there will be very good discussion at the end to really unpack some of these issues. So, first of all, just want to give you a very brief overview of what is IIED. IIED is a think tank, and our mission is to build a fairer and more sustainable world using action and influence, but evidence is really at the core of all we do. So IIED was built was founded in 1974 by an economist, and since then has been playing an active role in the development space to add the sustainable world to development. So it's not just about development, but actually we have to think about the planetary boundaries. But at the same time, also, what we try to do is to create a bridge between these two different worlds, which sometimes are quite far from each other: the development world and the environmental biodiversity and conservation world. And with the conservation world, we always try to stress the importance of thinking about the needs of people. So it's not just about conserving the environment, but actually how can we do it in a way which is sustainable, which is fair and equitable for everybody. So the way we work, as you can see on the left-hand side, these are the key challenges we work on at the moment. This is the theory of change of our new strategy. And our new strategy is focusing on these 5 main areas: increasing inequality, the climate crisis, natural resources management and the current assault on the natural world, urban risk and human settlement, and unsustainable markets. So these are the challenges that we are trying to tackle with our work and research that we do with partners. In the middle box, you can see instead the kind of key outcomes that we try to achieve in the short and medium term, which is really to improve interactions between these different groups. So at the core is really bringing together people and perspective from very different angles. As we said, from the conservation and the development space, or from the global perspective, people working in multilateral organizations, but also people working at the local level in local authorities or in national authorities. And with different types as well, because it could be with the private sector. We have a group which is actually dedicated to work with the private sector, and others who are mostly working with national and local authorities. So as I said, the core is really evidence and how we can create capacities and capabilities to create evidence across different spectrums. So it could be around evaluation, how evaluation creates evidence, but of course the bulk of our work is more research. And finally then it is actually about the type of evidence that we put out there. So are we adding anything new? Are we changing the body of evidence about solutions that work for sustainable development? And the longer term outcomes, those are the kind of the things that we want to achieve in the long term. Basically, they relate to 3 main things: equitable and effective governance, increase resources for people living in poverty and exclusion, and strengthen voice and rights of people living in poverty and exclusion. So these are the kind of key areas of work, and these are the outcomes that we are trying to achieve in the mid and long term. But So sustainable development, what's changing, what's happening out there? And we think that, there is quite a lot of excitement now in terms of the narrative of sustainable development. A lot is happening. Many actors are actually coming into the space. It is clear that we have a big crisis, and that's the bad news, which is assaulting the natural resources and the issues that we have with the climate. But there are also good news, because in 2015 has been a kind of a turning point. In October, 2015, we had the adoption of the SDGs and Agenda 2030. And in December that year, we had the Paris Agreement. And I remember that at the time, we have a team in IIED that was working with the least developed countries for Paris, for the negotiation. The days before Paris, there was really a lot of skepticism that a good deal could be agreed. But actually, eventually, it was able. We were able to get a good agreement, very ambitious, with a very clear plan to reduce emission and improve resilience of people to the climate crisis. So 2015 looked good. It seemed to be sustainable development. Yes. Big issues, big crises, but at the same time, also big commitments. And then, 2016, we had the election of Donald Trump, which of course, we may all have different views about Trump, but clearly, it's been denying for a long time some of the issues that we were saying were big problems. So, this is just to remember ourselves. Yes, there are, there is an increased awareness that things are going bad, and we can commit to improve them, but at the same time there is also the setbacks. So, but the world is changing, and the SDGs actually, we think, are gradually becoming a common language. So the good news is that with Agenda 2030, despite being a very complex agenda with a lot of goals and being criticized by many actors, at the same time, though, is creating a common language which can help to address issues related to sustainability from different angles. And also, we have a very ambitious agenda set by the Paris Agreement with clear targets and with clear commitments from different governments. So things are changing, things are moving, and actually we have new tools to work on sustainability and sustainable development. So what do we do in terms of evaluation, which is the focus of today? In terms of evaluation for sustainable development, we really do three things in IIED. The first one is we try to work on questions. We try to frame the right questions. And I think, in this sense, we try to bring together evaluation practitioners on the one hand and sustainable development practitioners on the other, and think about what is a good evaluative questions and what is a good evaluative questions for sustainable development. The second point is around methods, because we think that still there is a lot to do in order to identify the appropriate methods, tools, and approaches for sustainable development. Okay, once we have defined the questions, then we have to think about how do we go to operationalize those. And finally, capacities. So how can we improve capacities in monitoring, evaluation, and learning? So these three things are the three areas of work that we do in the MEL team in IIED. So one approach to look at the questions, so starting from the questions, is to think about the two big agreements that we have, which are the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2030. One of the challenges identified with the SDGs is the fact that we have 230 indicators, 169 targets, and government really find difficult to operationalize these agreements within their own national context. And we think that evaluation in this sense is a great opportunity to actually support countries to address the challenges of Agenda 2030. But rather than looking just at the goals, we think it is also important from an evaluative perspective to look at the principles which underpin the agenda. And by looking at the principles, we can think about what is missing in the evaluation criteria, what is missing in the evaluation questions and sub-questions. and we can kind of address those issues in the evaluations that we do. So these are the principles that have been developed together with partners recently through a number of workshops and in a guide which will be published soon. And these are integration and coherence, leave no one behind, equity, resilience, environmental sustainability, universality, and mutual accountability. So these are 2 publications where you can find more about these issues. The first one is already been published, and it's about operationalizing the Paris Agreement into evaluation. What are the issues that we need to consider when we evaluate climate adaptations, still from the point of view of the question that you should ask. And the second one is instead about the SDGs. So how can we address the SDGs in evaluation? It's more focused on national type of evaluation, but still there are a lot of concepts that can be used even if you do thematic focus evaluation at the program level or more specific project evaluations. And the second one is forthcoming. This was actually done together with UNICEF, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and DEval SDGs, which is an international network, but also DEval contributed greatly to the project with Sven, who came to the event, and with several examples. So, going back to the point, we kind of wanted to have this overarching view, because we think that by thinking about the principles underpinning Agenda 2030, we can also think a bit better about what it means for evaluating adaptation. How can we actually think about comprehensively evaluating adaptation? What does that mean? And what does it mean? So, what is adaptation? Adaptation is basically the uncertainty that we have ahead of us. We don't really know what adaptation will be, because we don't know how much the world is going to change. And these are a few different scenarios that we have in front of us. There is one scenario, which is the current one considered by the Paris Agreement, is that the world will increase by 1.5 to 2 degrees, the global temperature, within 2030 or 2050, and then it will stop. But then actually, you have other scenarios where the world temperature will increase much more quickly, up to the dramatic one, which you can see at the top, that eventually the world temperature could increase up to 4 degrees relative to pre-industrial level, and that would be, of course, a disaster. Now, we really hope that the situation on top is unlikely, although we can't completely discard that hypothesis, because we don't know about the feedback loop that exists in the natural system. So the first thing to consider when we think about adaptation is really, okay, so are we prepared? To what extent have we thought about these different scenarios when we do our programming projects? Have we considered somehow if the adaptation measures that we have put in place to tackle the 1.5 challenge actually could hamper the situation, could hamper improvements if the situation gets much, much worse? So, first thing is really embracing uncertainty and thinking about the fact that there are different situations ahead. We really have to think about the future. And this is, I think, already something new for evaluation, because we were used to think about the past. Have we achieved goal? To what extent have we achieved those outcomes? Actually, the challenge here is to what extent those outcomes will help us to achieve something in the future if the situation gets much worse. So this is the first big shift. Applying the principles concepts, and again, this is not prescriptive. It's just this is just a way to look at, it's a heuristic to look at the problem, so we can actually explore new questions. From the integration and coherence perspective, the big question is adaptation action supporting the achievement of national development goals? And is it coherent with other national programs? From the leave no one behind perspective, the big question is whether the policy implementers and designers have considered actually the effects on climate change on the most vulnerable population. And also, whether adaptation funding is reaching the most vulnerable areas to climate change. Actually, the second question is something I developed yesterday night after the conversation with our colleagues who are already doing this kind of analysis on some of their evaluation. And I think this is a very good question. Is our funding considering the most vulnerable areas of the world or not? Equity, are we considering different vulnerabilities when we are doing our programs and their impact on different type of populations? Environmental sustainability. This links really to the scenarios and whether the adaptation measures are based on best science and knowledge. And again, this is a principle which we can find in the Paris Agreement. And it's something that usually in evaluation we wouldn't necessarily do. And here is the challenge. We have to consider science and knowledge even more than what we did before. But then the big question is, of course, effectiveness when it comes to evaluation. Effectiveness, impact, changing baselines, how do we do that? It is a real challenge. When it comes to adaptation, then you can consider sort of a matrix where you think about what it means to have, have things improved in terms of well-being on this side, and on the common side, whether actually there have been hazards, and to what extent those hazards were bad or not. So if you think about that, then you think about the outcomes that you have achieved. It's no longer about just the well-being, it's also about thinking about the well-being in relation to the hazards. Using this matrix, you can actually apply different evaluation methodologies. Finally, the last two questions are really around universality and mutual accountability. Universality, the way we talk about universality in the guide is less about reaching everybody in the world, like whether the program is actually reaching every person, because in a sense that is already covered by the leave no one behind and the equity principles. But universality in this sense is more about the spillover effect, which is sometimes not reflected in the analysis that we do. So again, what are the unintended consequences that can hamper the achievement of outcomes in other parts of the world. Finally, last point, mutual accountability. And here the questions are more related to the extent to which people are included, whether they are participating in the program design, whether they had a view on the programs that are implemented. Again, these are not things which are new to the evaluation community, because participatory approaches have been there for a long time. But I think what is new, and probably what is new in our practice, is trying to turn the argument to its head and ask, are the funders actually thinking about, how the grant schemes are designed? Are they thinking about the benefits and also the views of the beneficiaries? What are the power dynamics in the programs that we are evaluating? And in that sense, that's why it's mutual accountability. It's no longer just the accountability of the implementers, but it's also the accountabilities of the funders and how they two work together when a climate adaptation program is delivered. So this is the big umbrella, but now I would leave the floor to my colleague Emilie, who will go more into the nitty-gritty details of the methodology.